with Cleanbody nutritionist Tori, and we are talking about the number one root cause of eczema. So, if you have eczema and you are interested in really delving into the root causes, today, again, we are going to talk about that number one root cause that we pretty much see across the board when we are caring for our patients with eczema. So, definitely join us today and join this conversation. We are going to be opening it up to questions as well when we get to the end here. So definitely type in your comments, type in your questions, and we are going to be happy to answer all of those. So, one thing, why do we need to talk about the root cause of eczema? Well, this is because conventional medicines are not really providing that lasting cure that we are looking for. And yes, I'm using that word cure because we really want to get to the root cause rather than just silencing the symptoms, which is what we're doing with conventional medicines. We really want to understand what the root causes are. And that is what we're talking about today. And we're actually going to break down the number one root cause that we see with eczema patients. Again, across the board, this is typically something that we see across the board. So definitely stay here and join this discussion with us if you want to talk about this root cause and really uncover it for yourself. So first, we need to start here. Symptoms are really just an alarm system. Your eczema symptoms are just an alarm that are indicating imbalance in your internal environment and that there is a problem in your internal environment. It's not just a skin symptom. This goes deeper than that. And the number one root cause of eczema that we see in our clients and our patients is microbial imbalance. Now, what does this mean? Well, we are made up of so many microbes. Our body is basically built upon microbes, millions of microbes in our body. And these microbes are kind of like an army that protect us against the world. They actually do so many things for us, including making things like B vitamins, neurotransmitters, helping us to digest our food, even doing things like lowering inflammation and modulating our immune function. And so when we have imbalances in these microbes, we can really wreak havoc in our system. Now, how are the ways that we wreak havoc in our microbiome system? Well, number one, antibiotics is a big one. So whenever, we take antibiotics, we are basically wiping out both good and bad bacteria, and that can really cause that microbial imbalance, okay? Our diets are filled with sugar, and those sugars actually feed all of the microbes, good and bad, in our system. And our diets are low in good fibers. And fibers are really selective to help us feed our good microbiome. And why is our good microbiome good? Well, the reason that is the case is because our good microbes make what we call postbiotics. And these postbiotics, again, do so many things for us in our body to help lower inflammation and help us to digest our food and help more good bacteria to grow in our system. So when we mess up this microbial balance, we can really cause a problem. The other thing may be our babies born by C-section. Unfortunately, babies born by C-section are not getting that good microbiome through the vaginal canal. And so many other things in our environment. We're using things like antimicrobial hand sanitizers, and we are actually less exposed to microbes in the world nowadays because we are just so clean and sometimes too clean, where we're actually not getting exposure to these beneficial microbes that we should be getting exposure to. Okay. And there is definitely a link between the intestinal microbiome and the skin microbiome. There is a gut skin axis here. And so, when we are thinking about microbial imbalance, it's not just about the microbes inside of our system, but that does affect the microbes on our skin as well. And we are seeing here that there is an intestinal and skin microbiome connection. Now, when the microbes get off balance, unfortunately, we can leave ourselves open to different pathogens in our guts and in our systems in general. And so this this right here is talking about microbes like parasites, and these are pathogenic organisms that are really going to wreak havoc in our system. And we are seeing here that atopic disorders like eczema can be related to parasitic infections. We also see here that mold can be another offender that elicits atopic dermatitis or eczema. And mold is, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when I introduce Tori to the conversation, can be in our food, but it can also be in our environment. Okay. And not only current exposure to mold, but also prenatal exposure to mold can also lead to potential eczema problems in baby. So when mom is pregnant and mom is exposed to mold, this can actually lead to allergic inflammation type symptoms in the infants. Okay. And then Staphylococcus aureus is a bacteria that a lot of us eczema people are familiar with, because a lot of us end up getting staph aureus infections. And often the reason for that is because the beneficial microbiomes on our skin are not healthy. The beneficial microbiome in our gut is not healthy, and we leave ourselves open to these opportunistic bacteria growing a little bit out of control. Staph aureus can be in our systems, but when it grows out of control, that's really when the problem occurs. Um, and then conventionally, what are we doing for this? We are typically doing antibiotics, which are just wiping out not only the Staph aureus, but all the good bacteria as well too. And that's why we eczema people will find ourselves just having infection after infection after infection, just over and over and over again, right? And it's because the way that we're dealing with this is we're just trying to kill that bug over and over and over again, and not really trying to repopulate a good microbiome on the skin. Um, and we sometimes need to do both in order to really get to the root cause of eczema. All right, I would love to now invite Tori to this conversation. So Tori is a Cleanbody nutritionist, and we are gonna now start the conversation of what do we do about these microbial imbalances. And right here we see a Bristol stool chart. So one of the first things we as a team do when we support our clients and patients at Cleanbody is, this sounds a little gross, but we ask you to take pictures of your poop and upload them for us into your journal, because actually seeing your poop is really eye-opening for us. And what we want to see are these type 4 bowel movements where your poop looks brown, looks like a sausage or a snake, and it's smooth and soft. And Tori, tell me a little bit about what we can do nutritionally if this is not the case, or what does this indicate when someone has more like a type 1 or a type 5 or 6 poop going on?
Yeah, absolutely. We can tell so much from your poop. And although most people don't love taking pictures of their poop, it's really helpful. And so, yeah, we're looking for if there's constipation present, we might be looking at hydration. We might be looking at a low fiber diet, a lot of sugar. Sometimes we see the opposite where the stool is really loose and there could be infection that we potentially might be looking for, or dietary choices that could be causing sensitivity or allergy. Sometimes we see undigested food in the stool. That can be a sign that maybe you're not chewing adequately, you're not taking your time and being mindful when you're eating, but it also can be, possibly that your body's just not doing a great job breaking down what you're eating and able to assimilate those nutrients well. So we also look at color. The color can indicate if the bile is flowing the way that we need it to. So that gives us a little bit of a clue about the gallbladder and the liver and how that's working, which is a huge part of digestion as well that often gets overlooked. So a lot of information in poop that we can tell.
Yeah, and when have you ever worked with a practitioner who is asked to see your poop? We
Right.
are that team, right? Because I think sometimes we'll ask people, "Oh, what does your poop look like?" They're like, "Oh, it's normal. It's a type 4," and then they send us a picture, and it's not a type 4. It looks more there are cracks, it looks like it's dry, and that can indicate things like dehydration. And so it tells us so much about you. So the first thing we ask you to do when we work together is taking pictures of your poop, because what comes out of your body tells us a lot about what's going in, and also the microbiome health as well too. So sometimes, as Tori said, if you have like a parasite infection or some kind of infection, you're going to see more watery poops. And then if you're not eating enough fiber, you'll see different types of poop. So it can be super eye-opening, and this is one of the really best ways to evaluate your gut health, without testing. So that is that. And now, what else can we do to evaluate? Well, the next thing we can do is really do testing. And stool testing, it's going to be a little bit different from what your conventional doc does. So your conventional doc might be looking only for like pathogens. They might be looking for H. pylori. They might be looking for parasites. But they are not necessarily looking at good bugs, which is one thing that we really want to see. Like, do you have beneficial bacteria in your gut? Do you maybe just have a dysbiosis, like an imbalance in your gut, and not necessarily like a pathogenic infection? Do you have inflammation? Do you have something called leaky gut? And this is where a comprehensive gut analysis can be really, really helpful. This test, we do multiple different types of tests depending on our patient and what they might need. This test we're looking at here is actually a 3-day collection. And as you can see, it tells us a lot of different information, like whether you're digesting your food, whether there's a lot of inflammation, dysbiosis, which is that imbalance in the gut microbiome, whether you have infection. And we can see things like parasites, which, as I showed you earlier, parasite infections can sometimes be silent and related to eczema, but they're not exactly silent, right? Because you are showing symptoms. You might just not be showing those normal parasite symptoms like diarrhea all the time and things like that. But because you have chronic symptoms like eczema, you really may be having things like parasites, and we should do some testing. One thing I would say is I do see a lot of people just kind of doing parasite protocols without the testing. Tori, tell us a little bit about, if someone does these things, how that could actually affect them in a negative way if they don't actually know that a parasite's there.
Yeah, well, anytime you take any kind of antimicrobial, you are disrupting the balance in your microbiome. So that could be a good thing if you're trying to kill a potential infection or a parasite. But if you're taking really strong, even herbs, it doesn't have to be, an antibiotic or something like that. But if you're taking, or a pharmaceutical, if you're taking strong herbal protocols for something that you don't need, you are potentially also affecting that good bacteria that we do need in your digestive tract. So be cautious of that. And there are things that get trendy and they kind of ebb and flow. And on some level, we all have different bacteria, parasites, viruses, fungus in our microbiome, but it's very much an ecosystem. So the problems arise when things get overgrown or out of balance. And so if you don't have something out of balance and you're bringing something else really potent in, that can cause other issues as well.
Yeah, so it's really important to get these things identified and evaluated, working with a team who can provide some testing for you and a confirmation of, okay, there really is a microbiome imbalance here. And yes, if you have eczema, there's likely some kind of microbiome imbalance, but what is that microbiome imbalance is important. And actually just shooting in the dark with your, blind, can actually be more detrimental to some people. Okay. So these are some of the, and this might be small, but for you to see, but it says digestion and absorption, inflammation and immunology, and gut microbiome metabolites. So this is really great because we can break down, are you digesting your food? Is there a lot of inflammation in your gut? Do you have something called leaky gut, which is where there's so much inflammation and the gut gets leaky and you start to leak things through? So Tori, tell me a little bit about how we like to use this information at Cleanbody to support the gut to heal.
Well, yeah, each one of these sections is great to see because our approach would be different for each section. So the top part, talking about the way your digestion is working, we're looking at, are you able to actually break down your food well? Are your digestive enzymes working the way they're supposed to? Are you able to break down fats and proteins and carbohydrates the way that your body was designed to? And sometimes we see that you're not breaking things down well, so you have some level of malabsorption happening. That happens often with fat. We see that people's stool can be sticky or have like grease on the top, and that can be a sign that you're not digesting fat well. So that would be something we would want to support to make sure that you are able to get the nutrients from your food, and that why is your body having trouble there, so we can investigate further. And then the inflammation and immunology is really important too, because inflammation in the gut can be a huge deal, and that can actually signify other problems, even autoimmune conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. So we take that seriously. If we see some of those levels elevated, then we want to make sure that we're addressing inflammation, and then looking at if the immune system in the gut is activated. And that can signify some of those imbalances that Dr. Fong was referring to, like pathogenic infections of some kind, parasites or bacterial infections that can affect that immune system in the gut. And then that last part, the metabolites, is there's all that bacteria in the gut has a purpose, and they actually make kind of like food for the colonic cells. And so we are checking that as well. Is the bacteria doing what it's supposed to? Do you have the right bacteria there so that it can do what it's supposed to kind of keep the whole ecosystem healthy and in balance? So each one of those areas, if they're not optimal, then we are working in different ways with food and supplementation to kind of bring those levels back to where they're supposed to be.
Absolutely. So these tests can be so eye opening for us and just really helpful in the process of evaluating the root causes for you. And today we're just breaking down that number one root cause that we see is some kind of microbiome imbalance in the system. And there is a spectrum here, right? That could be just dysbiosis, just an imbalance with no pathogens. And then there can be pathogens like parasites. And then this next one is mold. And mold can be really problematic because it can be in our food, it can be in our environments, and mold can release these toxins. They're called mycotoxins. And I know this might be a little small for people to read, but on the left here, we see mycotoxins. And then on the right, we kind of see what those mycotoxins do in our body. And you guys probably can't read it, but we can see like aflatoxins can cause impaired fetal growth. Let's see, these toxins from black mold can cause a weakened immune system, breathing issues, early puberty, low sperm counts, memory and breathing issues. And so these are the problems with these pathogens, is they can release toxins into our system. So we can do mold testing, and we can do that in several ways. But one of the ways that you're seeing here is to actually test the mycotoxins that are being released that are actually wreaking the havoc on the system. So that's another great test. So, fixing microbial imbalance can be a combination of things. And yes, sometimes we do have to use topical antimicrobials. And at Cleanbody, we really like to use natural topical antimicrobials. We're actually coming out with a product in June, which you can actually pre-order now in our Clean Skin Kit. And it is a topical antimicrobial that includes something called hypochlorous acid. And hypochlorous acid is actually something your immune cells make naturally. So it is a natural product, but it is antimicrobial, and it can selectively kind of kill things like Staph aureus and things like that. So a really nice topical antimicrobial to use when there is kind of that emergency situation, you're getting a lot of flares. We've seen that Staph aureus causes a lot of the itchiness, and especially if you have a lot of wounded skin, this is something that can really happen. But then additionally, we don't just want to kill what's going on. We actually want to repopulate. So topical probiotics can be really helpful. That's also in our new Clean Skin Kit that's happening. And then optimal nutrition is so important. So Tori, tell us a little bit about what optimal nutrition looks like for addressing microbiome imbalances.
So that can vary a lot from person to person, but generally speaking, we want you eating clean, which means not a lot of processed foods that are whole foods that come from the earth, lots of colorful foods that feed the microbiome, that all that healthy bacteria, and create more diversity, which a healthy gut is a gut that has a lot of bacterial diversity. So diversity is a good thing. So lots of different foods, not the same thing every day, day in and day out, but a variety of those fruits and veggies and healthy proteins and healthy fats. Being careful of things like toxins that are found in food. So things like glyphosate or Roundup. So we always tell people to prioritize looking at the Dirty Dozen list. It comes out every year by the Environmental Working Group, and that has a list of the 12 most pesticide-ridden foods in the grocery store shelves right now. And it does change year to year. There's a few that kind of stick on there usually, but it does change a little bit. So make sure that you're looking at the most updated list. They also put out a list that's the Clean 15, which I find really helpful. And those are the 15 foods that don't have as many pesticides. So you don't need to prioritize those being organic as often. So that can be helpful when you're prioritizing what foods to choose. And then, of course, how you cook your food matters. Is it in a plastic package? Are you throwing it in a microwave? So paying attention to all of those things is super important, and lots of fiber and rainbow foods. We're always looking for, we call them rainbow plates, and the Cleanbody program is just trying to get as much color on the plates as you can.
Awesome. And then definitely other healthy lifestyle factors. So at Cleanbody, we call those the pillars, which we'll go into in a minute. But, definitely working with a team that can then provide things like oral probiotics. But probiotics are really not the only thing. That's one way of kind of improving the microbiome. Diet's so important. But there are other factors. If there's a lot of inflammation or if there are infections or other things in the system, those need to be actually addressed. Not just taking probiotics, although probiotics can be helpful. So as I mentioned, the pillars of health are so important. And Tori just went over the clean food pillar, but there are multiple other pillars. Like stress can actually affect your microbiome. How much you exercise and get oxygen into your system can affect your microbiome. If you have a lot of toxic overload, because of so many toxic exposures, that can actually cause inflammation, and it can cause you to be more predisposed to dysbiosis as well. And then just making sure you have a really clean routine, like you are checking your poops, making sure they look like a type 4, you're drinking enough water, you're getting out there in the sun. All of these things are actually important for a healthy microbiome. So it's not just about focusing only on the gut, but actually focusing on overall health is important. And sometimes if we do find significant imbalances, we do need to do things like supplements and herbs and homeopathy and advanced nutrition plans and other supportive treatments. But at Cleanbody, we really like to think of this as, okay, let's start by evaluating first before we just start throwing things at you, throwing, a parasite cleanse and this cleanse and that cleanse at you. What is actually going on with you? Let's do some testing. Let's figure out the problems and really get those answers. And then we really like to say, okay, let's now optimize the pillars before we actually dive in and do all this work. But then, if you still have symptoms after we do both of those things, then we do want to use supportive measures. And our goal is not to keep you on supplements or things like that for the rest of your life. That is not an answer to us. It's really, can we get you to that finish line where everything is clean? You've cleaned up any microbial imbalances. You've supported the gut to heal. You've improved all your pillars, and now your body is functioning optimally. Okay, so if we do need to provide support, we usually do so in a stepwise fashion. And this is really important because often I do think that people jump to cleansing too quickly. So for us, there are 4 phases of Cleanbody support, and the third phase is cleansing. And I think if you guys have ever tried a detox or something like that, and you had symptoms from that, or you had increased symptoms, it may be because you're just detoxing too quickly, and you're just doing things too fast. You need to start by supporting the core. So that means nutritional imbalances, which of course, diet is a big part of that. Supporting the core organs like your gut first, making sure things like sleep get better before you actually start cleansing. And then we like supporting the drainage organs, which we are basically your detox organs, like your gut, your kidney, your liver, your lymphatic system. And then finally getting into the cleanse part. And then after that, once the body's clean, it's also about maintaining that clean body for life, right? Like the changes you have made, once you have cleaned things up, you can't just go back to square one. You have to, take this with you into your life, and that will help you to maintain that clean body for a lifetime. Okay. So we are going to open it up to questions now. If you guys have any questions, please go ahead and type into the chat box or the comment box here. And Tori and I are happy to answer any and all questions. Today, we are talking about microbe imbalances being the number one root cause of eczema that we pretty much see across the board with almost every eczema case. If you are interested in working with our team, let's definitely meet, and you can book a discovery consultation right now for 30% off. You can use the code MDIG. This is actually our Memorial Day code. It does expire on May 31st, so you have a couple of days to use that. And we do have a 100% money back guarantee on our consultation. So if you book a consultation with us and you don't feel like you get a lot of answers as to what the root causes might be for you, really understand what the testing and the treatment could look like, then you can ask for your money back. No questions asked there. And maybe you're not ready to dive in with our team and you just want to order some labs. Well, we do offer some labs through direct order. Our gut test, we showed it earlier. This is another version of that. It's called the Gut Zoomer. And we also have a food sensitivity test or even a total tox burden test that you have access to order directly. And the link is in my bio. Just click order labs. And then I did talk about the Clean Skin Kit earlier. So this is a 3-step system where you are basically calming any microbes that might be growing out of control. There is a topical probiotic that you're going to put here, and then a skin protectant. And that is a 3-step system. It is available for pre-order for shipping in June, and you can click the link in my bio for that one, okay? So I would love to open it up to questions now. Please type your questions or comments in the box. And Tori and I are happy to answer these. Remember, this is for educational purposes only. If you do want to get evaluated to see if this is a root cause for you, definitely book a consultation. Again, use the code MDIG for the 30% off, okay? All right, let's see what we got here. So let me go up because I know there were some questions earlier. Someone asked, I was told by a holistic doctor my liver was weak, and that is why my eczema is so bad. And definitely from a naturopathic point of view, liver is one of those drainage organs that when it is burdened with a lot of toxins, then you might see what I like to call this overflow of toxins in the body. And one of the places that might trigger symptoms is the skin. So I would actually agree with your holistic doctor here. But now the question is, what is actually causing that liver burden? What is causing that funnel to overflow? And of course, as Tori said, that could be from food. It could be from your environment. It could be from so many different places. Let's see here. Next question. Can you recommend a good sunscreen if you have inflamed skin? I would recommend that you go to our product recommendations and go to Skin and Beauty, and you can check out our skin sunscreen recommendations there. What's a good lotion to use for super dry skin due to eczema? I do recommend that you consider our Clean Skin Kit. So check it out. The link is in my bio. What is the best treatment for candida overgrowth, and what is the best treatment for yeast infection? So I'm actually going to let Tori talk about this from a nutritional point of view, because I actually think one of the first places to think about yeast and candida is actually in your nutrition.
Yeah, as far as food goes, the first thing that you would want to do is make sure your sugar intake is under control. And by under control, I mean really almost none. The sugar is really not good for the fungus and the yeast that's overgrown. And that all occurs, candida and yeast, a lot of times when we have antibiotics, that bacteria level just kind of gets annihilated and it paves a way for yeast to kind of just go crazy. And that's really common in a lot of the eczema cases that we see, that there's fungal issues as well, and there's yeast in the gut. So we do that with a variety of things with food, reducing those starchy carbs, reducing sugar. This is not something to do long term. This is something we use therapeutically. And Dr. Fong did kind of say that about supplements, but I want to reiterate that about food as well. We don't want you living in a restricted way for all of eternity to mitigate symptoms. We like to eliminate foods that are causing inflammation in the body and then heal the body and bring those foods back so that you have that optimal diversity of nutrition. And so the same would go with yeast. We would remove foods that are agitating that overgrowth and then work on actually healing that overgrowth. And that could be a variety of different ways that we address yeast. But sugar and starchy carbs are the first place to start there for sure.
And I would say, as with any root cause that we find, as we mentioned, food is one part of that, but there are four other pillars that are really important in the, if there's a yeast or candida overgrowth that we also need to think about. And then with a yeast or candida overgrowth, I think food is the first place to start. Supplements can be really helpful for a short time period with guidance. Because sometimes what I notice is some people will use these candida, treatments or yeast treatments for like years, for a long, long time. And they feel like they have to use these things or stay with this specific diet forever and ever, or else their symptoms will come back. And for us, that's not really getting to the root cause. It's kind of doing something to stop that process, just like a better version of conventional medicine. But it's still addressing the symptoms and not really getting to the root cause. And if that is happening to you, if you're someone who that's happening to, where you have to take these supplements or you have to not eat sugar all the time, otherwise you get all these symptoms, then I do invite you to consider working with our team so that we can uncover, well, why is that happening? Like there's something that's missing, right? And we have to figure out what's missing there. Maybe you're taking supplements but eating poorly. Maybe you're eating well and not taking the right supplements to actually kill and address those pathogens that are in your system. By taking out the sugars and the sweetness, you're starving those bugs, but sometimes it needs a little bit more. You need to kind of promote the health of the gut. You need to promote the health of your gut immune function, etc. Okay. Someone is asking, have heard about using beef tallow as a topical treatment. I have had patients who have really liked that. Some people do have some sensitivity to beef, so that can be problematic if you do. But I have had patients who have really enjoyed using that. This is not really, I wouldn't call it a treatment. I would call it more of a skin protectant. It's a really good kind of lubricator and protectant, almost like a Vaseline type situation. And I don't love Vaseline because of the petroleum and the minerals. So beef tallow is an option for some people, but it typically is not going to fix the problem from the inside. And that's what we really want, instead of just doing things topically. Okay. Someone says, my daughter totally broke out after she did the sauna blanket and now she's super itchy. What can I use to help calm her itchiness? Okay. So this is a really good example of cleansing before you're ready. So typically IR sauna is something we love at Cleanbody, but often people are not ready for that at the very beginning. And the reason for that is we need to open up what we call the drainage organs, right? Like we have to help the system to start draining out, because if you don't help the poop and the urine and drinking enough water and all of that, if you just start sweating, you're going to have all of these toxins try to release through that direction, and you are going to have a flare likely. So you don't want to start there. Now that you have done that, however, the thing that I would do to help that is cold. So just do the opposite, just cool it down. So I would do something like cool packs, or even a cold shower or a cold bath, or cryotherapy is also really great as well too. If you have a cryotherapy place near you, cryotherapy can really be awesome depending on how old your daughter is. Okay. Do you recommend using Benadryl or Claritin to calm itchiness? So, if you're using Benadryl and Claritin to calm itchiness and it's working, that means that you might be having a histamine response. So, Tori, what are some of the ways we can do that naturally to help the histamine responses?
Yeah, well, with food, we can avoid foods that agitate or create more histamine in the body. So there's a list of foods that we would be careful of. We have herbal support that we use at Cleanbody that can help in a similar fashion that a Benadryl would work, but it's more natural and it's herbal. So we would probably start there and then watch the foods as well. But that's a big clue for us, like Dr. Fong said, that if Benadryl is helpful, that's a little different than if it's not. And so where that individualized treatment is really important, because it'll be different for each person just depending on that. But if you're using it to control the itch, we have other homeopathy that we use too to help control itch that can be helpful as you're kind of transitioning. Some of our clients are transitioning off of using some of these medications or pharmaceuticals even that are moving to a more natural way, and we have some in betweens that you can function on as well.
Yeah. And again, not an answer, right? And definitely something we don't want to be taking forever and ever and ever. So even the natural stuff is not something we want to be taking forever. We want to figure out what's stimulating those mast cells to release the histamine, and hopefully target it that way. Now, what I do have to say is sometimes, in the meantime, sometimes things like Benadryl and Claritin can be helpful for us if the natural stuff isn't doing the job and the person is just having such a hard time with it, that we sometimes use those things. Typically, instead of Benadryl, I like things like hydroxyzine instead, because it might be more helpful for lowering that itch process. So those are some things we kind of sometimes we'll consider, but typically we like to try to do things naturally if at all possible. Okay, but there can be a time and a place for conventional medicine, but rather than using it as like this is the answer and this is all we're going to do, I think it's better to think of conventional medicines and therapies as these are emergency situations. This is what we do when there's an emergency, and then we still treat the underlying condition while we're maybe using that conventional medication. Okay. Someone is asking, how does it work if we want to join your team, but we live in Hawaii? So there are several states where we can support you. And I do believe Hawaii is one of those, Tori. I do believe
I think that it is. Yeah.
I think Hawaii is one of those places. So there are some states where we cannot, unfortunately, support you. So definitely check our website. And if you click the link in my bio for booking a consultation, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you can see the states that we can support you. And I do believe Hawaii is one of those. So so you would be open to working with our team. Okay. All right, great. If you have any other questions or comments, please go ahead and type into the chat box. Again, today we are talking about the number one root cause of eczema, and it is microbiome imbalance. And why do I call it the number one cause? Because I do feel like I see this in pretty much 100% of our eczema cases. Now, there is a spectrum to that. Again, it could be just dysbiosis. And then it could be you have pathogens like parasites and molds and things like that. But typically there is some kind of microbiome imbalance that we will uncover for most of our eczema patients. Okay, someone is asking, my daughter is currently taking a lot of supplements provided by her naturopathic doctor. Can she take your supplements without any issue? So no, so we wouldn't necessarily want to add to the protocol that someone is taking. If you are seeing a great naturopathic doctor and it is working for you, you may just want to kind of go that route and see how that goes for you, because it can be too many cooks in one kitchen. Sometimes if there is already a protocol you're following and then now you start to follow our protocol, you might actually end up getting confused by that situation and not know what to follow. So I think if you're happy with what's going on and you're moving in the right direction, then you stick with that. If you are if you've tried it and you feel like maybe it's not moving in the right direction for you, then it may be time to just kind of see, okay, is there another team? Is there another solution? Maybe there's just a couple puzzle pieces that you have been missing and we can fill in those gaps. But we do typically like to, for the naturopathic approach, we do like to kind of assess everything for you, take that on for you, and really give you a comprehensive approach. So that may, we would have to see what you're doing in order to fit, make that fit for us and for you. Okay. What do you suggest for eyelid eczema and seborrheic dermatitis? Okay. So if you have seborrheic dermatitis, there are absolute microbiome issues that are here. One of the microbes that is implicated here it's actually called Malassezia. It's a type of yeast, and that can be one still kind of everything that we talked about today is still very applicable, where you want to think about the gut microbiome and then also the skin microbiome, and what's going on there and how to promote an optimal microbiome on the skin and in the gut. So definitely something we deal with. And again, it's not just what you're putting on your eyelid or what you're putting on topically. That is typically not where you're going to find the answer ever in a skin condition. You have to think deeper than that. You have to think about your gut and what's happening with the liver and the gut and all of these organs that are really important. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? We would love to answer those. So you can continue to write those in, and we'll stay for about 5 more minutes to answer those. All right. Someone says, we have been prescribed topical steroids for my 2-year-old to keep eczema at bay. We have had environmental and food allergy testing. What do you recommend as next steps? Okay, great question. So that is exactly what happens for most patients, right? They're given a topical steroid and then they're asked to do an allergy test. So an allergy test is great to find allergies. That is not the only thing we need to think about when we're thinking about food. There are several other factors to consider. And sometimes there aren't just food allergies, but there are what we call food sensitivities or even food intolerances that are a little bit different from allergies. So that's one thing to consider. And then Tori did go over a whole bunch of other stuff today, that other things to consider too, right? So nutrition, we want to customize it to you and to what is important for you. So I think allergies are only one part of that. So that's the first thing to think about. The second thing to think about is topical steroids. Okay, so again, these topical steroids, they're great for an emergency situation and using them for extremely short-term period of time. The problem occurs when we really aren't getting to the root cause and we're just using these things topically, and we're using them now for a long period of time. Our bodies, especially a 2-year-old, has very thin skin and is going to be absorbing these steroids into the internal system. And that is going to potentially lead to a systemic, that steroid being absorbed systemically. And that can cause what we call topical steroid withdrawal. Topical steroid withdrawal is where, your body is basically expecting these topical hormones, and if you stop using them, the body's like, uh-oh, where did these go? And your body no longer is making that on its own. And then topical steroid withdrawal, check out my blog, check out my free eczema guide. I talk about it there. It's where the body gets super red and inflamed, and it's now you have eczema and topical steroid withdrawal on top of that. So I especially on a little one, I really don't recommend just using topical steroids and only identifying the allergies. So book a consultation with us. There is a code right now. It's MDIG, and that is for 30% off the consultation. Go to the link in my bio and click book a consultation, and you can sign up for the consultation there for the person who's asking that, okay? So does this help with constipation? Yes. So, Tori, would you like to talk a little bit about that? Microbiome imbalances, getting to the root cause, and how that can help with constipation.
Yeah, it's actually one of the first things we work on with a lot of people is you've got to be going to the bathroom, and it has to be every day. And actually, most people don't know this. Really, it should be multiple times a day. You should be having bowel movements 2 to 3 times a day. And if you're not at least going daily, that can be a form of constipation, even if you're not having those Bristol 1 and 2s that are like little hard rocks and pebbles. But constipation, it goes hand in hand with eczema. We see it all the time. If your body is not able to get rid of the toxins in your poop, it will purge out of the skin because it is trying to get out any way that it can. So yes, everything that we do at Cleanbody is a process, but it's not just looking at the skin, it's looking at the whole body health, and constipation is absolutely part of that. One of the first things we would probably address.
Yeah, it is absolutely. I think I don't know, what would be the percentage, Tori, that you would say eczema people have constipation? It's pretty high. I would
It's
say
pretty
maybe,
high.
I don't know, even up to 50% or
I
even
would say
higher.
more. I would say
More,
more. I would
yeah.
say 75. Yeah. Mhm.
75, yeah. I would say
Mhm.
75% of eczema patients typically have constipation. Um, And that can be that you're actually pooping every day, but it looks like little balls. So we still call that constipation. I actually spoke to someone recently, and their doctor had told them that pooping once every 2 weeks was normal. So I was really surprised by that because we need to be pooping every day.
Yeah.
And we need that poop to look really nice. And if it doesn't, even if you're pooping every day, you're still constipated. Okay. All right. So someone was asking, how do we, what's the code? So I just put it up here. It is MD, Memorial Day, basically MDIG. This is our Memorial Day code, and it does expire on 5/31. So you have a couple more days to use that. And you will work directly with our team. Yes. So Tori is on our team, and myself, and there is another nutritionist as well. Her name is Rachel. So you will be working with one of us directly if you do decide to work with us. And let's see, any other questions here? Okay, I don't see any other questions coming up. So thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with us. And we will be doing these weekly every Wednesday at 11:15 a.m. So if you guys have topics you want us to cover, please DM me and let me know what those topics are. We're happy to cover those. Okay. Have a great week, everybody. And I hope to meet some of you soon. All right.